Hi there and welcome to MiWeek. I'm Christy McDonald. We are so happy to have you with us. We are talking money tonight and the state budget. But wait, don't zone out just yet. These are your tax dollars. So are we spending in the right places? Infrastructure, higher education, and the two biggest problems statewide, Detroit Public Schools and the water crisis in Flint. We are going to put it all in perspective for you tonight. So let's take a look at what the governor is proposing. Infrastructure upgrades, $165 million for a newly created Michigan Infrastructure Fund. A K-12 funding boost by $150 million. More spending for higher education, over $60 million, brings it back to levels from 5 years ago. A proposal for $720 million over the next 10 years for Detroit Public Schools, and a large amount for Flint, $195 million to deal with continued fallout from the water crisis there.
Clean drinking water is a human necessity. Residents across Flint, especially children, have been exposed and impacted by lead in water. In addition, they're having to use bottled water and filters today instead of taking water out of the tap. That's not a situation anyone should have to go through. Being exposed to lead is harmful, particularly to children, and you have to assume those effects are lifelong. One of the things that's clear in this situation is we must assume all children have been exposed in Flint. And part of the recommendations are to actually approach this in a way that we're going to work on the assumption all children have been exposed, and then work on finding the ways to help the children that are showing any implications of lead poisoning in some fashion.
All right, so you hear the governor talking about the budget, but you also hear protesters in the background. They were at the Capitol when he was presenting his budget. But here's how the $195 million breaks down for Flint. $37 million for safe drinking water efforts, $15 million for food and nutrition, $63 million for improving the social and educational well-being of Flint children, $30 million in water bill credits, and $50 million in reserve for the future. We are going to talk about all the key aspects of the budget tonight, and we're going to start, though, with Flint. So let's bring in Nolan Finley of the Detroit News, Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. All right, guys, we've been talking the last couple of weeks. All right, let's wait to see what the governor has in his proposed budget when it comes to helping out Flint. Stephen, I'm going to start with you tonight. In looking at the numbers and the breakdown, was it enough what he proposed?
I mean, I think it's a big number, and you know, the way they're dividing it up makes some sense in terms of what you need to do right now in Flint. But I think even the governor acknowledges this is a beginning, and you're going to need more over time. My disappointment, I think, is with this being one-time money that we have found in one place or another, and that the governor didn't take the opportunity to get a discussion started about changing tax structure, changing the way we deal with the relationship between cities and state government to get more money overall to cities. We continue to talk about Flint and the water crisis as though it really is just about lead pipes and water quality, when in fact, you know, the people of Flint could get clean water tomorrow and their lives would still be desperately undesirable in terms of the kind of opportunities they have and in terms of the kind of services they have in that city. The governor had an opportunity. They were selling this budget last week as him sort of taking on the persona of a New Deal Democrat, you know, Franklin Roosevelt type budget. There's nothing even remotely like that in this budget. It is one-time money that they're grabbing from here to move to here. It is not a rethinking of the way that we finance government in the state of Michigan.
There was a little bit more in terms of revenue sharing for cities, and he did say we're going to now have this new infrastructure fund. Nolan, how important is it when you're looking at this budget that a lot of these things are also going to be appropriations? They're not going to be waiting until October of next year to see a lot of this money.
I mean, and that's good. And I think disagree with a bit with Steve. There are things in that budget to improve the long-term lives, not just of the people in Flint, but around the state. There's money in there for preschool education to get our education systems up and running a little better. That helps kids all over the state, including Flint. There's job training money. We desperately need to get our workers trained for the jobs that are coming into Michigan. We are now in a situation where we have more jobs, high-tech jobs and high-skilled jobs, than we have workers to fill them. We need to be able to take advantage of it. There's money in there for that. This $165 million to start addressing the infrastructure. It's not a ton of money when you consider the need,
right,
but it's a start, and it's more than what we've been able to do for 10 years. And I think the money for higher education, bringing that, restoring that back to where it was, is a huge deal, because
and we are going to talk about that in just a few minutes. I do want to concentrate a little bit on Flint and talking about the infrastructure. This week, the mayor called again and saying, look, I have a plan, a $55 million plan to replace the pipes in Flint. Still, the governor's office and the administration is not sure that that is the exact way to go, that they said they've set aside $25 million in case that may happen somewhere down the road. My question is, should that end up happening sooner than later, and should the governor be going in terms to the federal government and saying we need to start to get that money?
Well, I mean, you've got our congressional delegation on both sides of the aisle already talking about that in Washington.
Should the governor have gone to those congressional hearings yesterday and said, all right, I'm here, I'm going to answer some questions, and while I'm here, we need some kind of money?
I think that would satisfy a lot of people who want to see him on the hot seat and want to see him squirm and sweat. Name the last governor of any state who appeared before a congressional hearing, though. I think that's just not the way this works. You don't get to call governors of states before Congress. There is at least in principle, a separation of powers issue there. More important, that the officials who he appointed to manage water quality in the state of Michigan were there to answer the questions about what they did or what they didn't do. I think replacing the pipes, again, really important, but look at what that looks like statewide as opposed to just in Flint. I mean, we are talking about this as though this is a crisis that unfolded over the last 2 years and has no other context, and that's just not true. It has other context in Flint, it has other context around the state of Michigan, and my disappointment is that the governor didn't get after those things. $165 million for infrastructure statewide, I could spend that in a weekend and you wouldn't see the difference.
And it's more than what we have been spending. As far as replacing pipes, that may be the answer, it may not be, and I think we need to approach this very cautiously and know what we're doing. I've talked to people and read some things over the last week that suggest you could disturb more lead and add more lead to the environment that way than simply going the recoating process. And I'm really not a believer you can do that for $55 million in 18 months like they propose. I think it's going to be a massive job. They don't even know where the lead pipes are yet.
All right, something else I want to talk about this week in terms of Flint is we saw more emails coming out having to do with the health department and with the DEQ and talking about the Legionnaire's disease problem. And again, it was a lot of this finger pointing, cover your behind, it's not me, it's off to somebody else. And so if we're seeing this culture at the DEQ, especially, what other state agencies I'm thinking about do we need to be?
DHS in there.
That we need to be careful of, because again, and I think we've all been in those work situations where you work with certain people that are like, it's not my problem, or I didn't do it, or there's a lot of finger pointing, and I'm just wondering, God, that they can't only be happening at the DEQ.
It's not. It's a culture in state government, and I think one of the questions that the governor himself ought to be really concerned about and addressing quite publicly is this something that's cropped up since he has been governor? Is this a function of the way he sees government? Conservatives in this state and around the country have talked for years about how government has too much money and not enough accountability. Is this a function of trying to strip government to bare, or is this a wider culture in government that has been around for a long time? I don't think we know the answer to that, but I do think he needs to start talking about it.
Last word on Flint, what do you think?
Of course we know the answer to that. We had the kids killed in the DHS during the terms of the last governor. This was a government failure at every level. State, federal, local. I think this is a symptom of government and a civil service system where there's no accountability, no expectations, and people are in the habit of just shoving things along and not dealing with it.
Where we've also, vastly underinvested in all of these agencies. One of the first things Governor Snyder did, for instance, was take a bunch of money out of DEQ when he was elected in 2010. Did that help or did that hurt? These are things that he's got to start sort of facing up to. The various ideological theories of government.
So you're saying this happened at the DEQ because Governor Snyder took funding away from the DEQ?
It may have. I think it may have. I don't know, but I think the various ideologies about government, both on the left and the right, tend to govern the way we see it instead of looking at what does government need to do, what money does it need to do it, and how do we hold them
But this
accountable.
wasn't resources, this was competence, this was human error, people not doing their job. And what we might want to take a look at, we've got some of the best universities in this state, research universities, people with technical talent. Why aren't we using our universities more to supplement the expertise of these state departments?
You asked this question, did this happen at DEQ because of the money that was taken out of it? Don't you want an answer to that question? Don't you want the governor to go figure that out? Don't you think that's possible, that was one of the reasons that this happened? I mean, these are the things that we need to be talking about, and I think instead of arguing about, the ideology about government, let's look at what the effect of the things that have been done.
Flat out lied here and flat out misled and misinterpret reports. I don't see how that's a resource issue.